What's up, guys? Time to learn some economics. Today we're going to go through the lecture for modules 30 and 31. And in these modules, we're going to talk about the budget deficit and debt and budget balance and all that other fun stuff that everyone likes to freak out about. So the budget balance is the difference between the government's tax revenue and its spending, both on goods and services and on government transfers. So the formula up there states that the savings by the government is equal to the value of tax revenues minus government purchase of goods or services minus the value of government transfers. Other things equal, discretionary expansionary fiscal policies reduce the budget balance for that year, and contractionary policies do the opposite. So expansionary fiscal policies make a budget surplus smaller or a deficit bigger. Contractionary policies increase the budget balance for that year, making a budget surplus bigger or a budget deficit smaller. Now, some of the fluctuations in the budget balance are due to the effects of the business cycle. So if we have an expanding economy, we're going to have an increase in tax revenues, which is going to reduce the deficit or increase the surplus. If we have a recession, the government is going to be spending more on automatic stabilizers, but they're also going to be taking in less tax revenue because there's going to be fewer people working and paying federal income taxes. So some of those are caused by the business cycle. Now, as you can see, the budget deficit during periods that are shaded or periods of recession increases as a percentage of GDP during recession, and then after recession during recovery, it usually will decrease. The U.S. federal, so the unemployment rate and the budget deficit, as the unemployment rate goes up, the deficit usually will increase as well. The cyclically adjusted budget balance, basically what that does is it takes away the impact of the business cycle. So if we take away that impact, we can actually see the budget deficit is a little bit less. It'll increase during these times typically because the government will do expansionary fiscal policy and have some sort of stimulus plan passed. Now, should the budget be balanced? Most economists do not believe the government should be forced to run a balanced budget every single year because this would undermine the role of taxes and transfers as automatic stabilizers. Yet policymakers concerned about excessive deficits sometimes feel that rigid rules are necessary. Now, a fiscal year, guys, runs from October 1st to September 30th and is labeled according to the calendar year in which it ends. Persistent budget deficits do have serious long-run consequences because they lead to an increase in public debt. All right. A widely used measure of fiscal health is the debt to GDP ratio. This number can remain stable or fall even in the face of moderate budget deficits if GDP rises over time. So if we have an increasing GDP by a lot and our deficit stays the same, then eventually the deficit will become much less as a comparison to GDP. There's a little information about our World War II debt right there for you. So that's the, one more thing to talk about real quick. So implicit liabilities, I want you to go ahead and write this on the back somewhere, are spending promises made by governments that are effectively a debt despite the fact that they are not included in usual debt statistics. So it's what we are going to have to pay in the future. So programs like Social Security and Medicare are implicit liabilities. So this is an interesting chart that kind of shows you how future projections of spending on Medicare and Medicaid and on Social Security. As you can see, we will have to pay these out, right? And the actual amount that we end up paying could vary based on different government programs and who's alive and whatnot. But we count that as an implicit liability because eventually we're going to have to pay for it. All right. So that's it for Module 30. Here we go. Okay, so here's the lecture for Module 31. We're going to talk a little bit about monetary policy here and the role that it can have. This should be a review module, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. Through an increase or decrease in the money supply, the Federal Reserve can set the interest rate. In practice, the Federal Open Market Committee sets a target federal funds rate. The way that they do that is through open market operations. So they'll adjust the money supply. They'll either buy U.S. government bonds and increase the money supply, or they'll sell U.S. government bonds and decrease the money supply. Either way, that'll be the case. The effect of an increase in the money supply on the interest rate. So when, so go ahead and draw this expansion of monetary policy. So, when the money supply increases, that lowers the interest rate. Pushing up the interest rate. So if we do no market sale, it's contraction of monetary policy, shifts money supply to the left. All right, so this is what I want you to write in those little boxes underneath. Expansion of monetary policy is monetary policy that increases aggregate demand. Contraction of monetary policy is monetary policy that reduces aggregate demand. You should already have this drawn, but I want you to go ahead, if you don't, draw this chart on the back of your paper. The increase in money supply leads to a lower interest rate, leads to higher investment spending, which raises income, which leads to higher consumer spending via the multiplier, which then will increase aggregate demand. If we go back to our aggregate demand, aggregate supply graph, contraction of monetary policy is going to have the exact opposite effect. So the three goals of the Federal Reserve are going to be as follows. So I'm going to write this down here. Three goals: price stability, economic growth, and full employment. All right, so they're going to try and institute policies that will have that effect for the economy as a whole. Inflation targeting occurs when the central bank sets an explicit target for the inflation rate and sets monetary policy in order to hit that. Our target inflation rate in this country is 2%. So if we're at 2% inflation, that means everything is going well. The Federal Reserve is doing it's doing its job. If inflation starts getting higher, they're going to raise interest rates in order to reduce the amount of spending and the amount of money going through the economy. All right, and that's it. If you have any questions, write them down, bring them to class. Have a good rest of your day.